Computer games have allowed us to indulge in a lot of fantasies that we could never normally experience. We can fly intergalactic ships between planets, become a blue hedgehog who holds golden rings, defeat an evil drug lord to free an island from their corrupting grasp, even drive a bus in a desert. These diversions are all wonderful, but generally a character's actions are set in stone. We have to choose a red and white orb containing an enslaved animal in order to make our way in the world. We need to speak to a wise old tree before we can leave the sacred forest. We must turn our heads to look at some bright lights to calibrate our power armour before we can evacuate the Pillar of Autumn. These things aren't up for discussion. It's made very clear that the character on screen is not you. The people depicted have their own set personalities, and while in a lot of cases we can understand their motivations and wish to help in their struggles, sometimes we just want to make them act in a way that gels with our own worldview, rather than being an unthinking automaton only concerned with their quest. Developers know this, and sometimes they try to give you a certain amount of personal influence with a morality system. As a concept, it seems like a good idea. You might make Commander Shepard act with benevolent intent, leading by example and spreading his vision of inclusiveness to the other races of the galaxy. Or you can be the supreme butthole and punch every news reporter that you find. While all that might be fun, the system is usually tied to some game mechanic that means you have to act in a certain way in order to get the good superpowers or ending. If you want the ability to sweet talk people into helping you, then you may have to grimace through a lot of boring conversations to raise your charm statistic. Slapping people around for being an idiot, no matter how well deserved, might mean you miss a perk point that you need to persuade an alien to join you, or to end a standoff peacefully. I understand that it's hard to condense the entirety of human morality into a set of binary logic gates, but if you're going to invest in the system, then it needs to be robust and, more pertinently, believable. Unlike the decision to choose your car down a sidewalk in Grand Theft Auto, a morality system has to hold up to your and its own internal logic. Otherwise, why create the choice in the first place? Why not just place the canonical response of the character into a pre-rendered cutscene? Like a lot of other people, my first introduction to morality as a mechanic was in Knights of the Old Republic. You could act like a Jedi or a Sith and get coded responses from people. What I didn't like was that there was no way to choose to be a good Jedi with lightning powers, as that's an evil Sith trait apparently. Similarly, there's no advantage to being a diplomatic character, as staying in the middle of the road meant you got severely washed out versions of all the powers. You had to be all in to be an effective force wielder. Being rude to an ambassador was not an option if you wanted the top-notch healing abilities, as that depended on your alignment. It didn't feel natural, and it was less a choice of morality and more one of obtaining the coolest powers. To this day, it's still the only game where I completed a full dark side run, just because I wanted to see lightning blasting from my fingers. As it turned out, this was also the game that turned me off from being completely evil in morality-based games, as some of the choices you had to make in order to gain ultimate power really rubbed up against my actual personality, especially near the end. If anything, games should indulge more in pointless morality systems, where conversations and actions have no bearing on the good-bad meter, but subtly reward you for staying true to your chosen path. For example, the game Infamous on the PlayStation 3 had a basic moral system. You could do nice things or nasty things that, in aggregate, affected the type of ending you got. There was no real choice system, except whether to drain people of their energy. Having said that, a small thing that I think everyone overlooked was the reaction of the pedestrians to the monsters that were terrorising the city. When a creature attacked a random person, you could either go about your business or intervene. There was no advantage in either action, but if you did decide to save the hapless person, they would thank you effusively and praise you a little. It felt good and reinforced that you were doing the right thing by acting like a hero. Obviously, being evil and leaving them to their fate provided no endorphin release, as the poor resident wasn't in a position to say anything. Alternatively, in Cyberpunk 2077, there was a character you had to interrogate in order to get information about a missing friend, but he was obviously a horrible person. In my playthrough, I finessed my way through the dialogue choices to get as much information as possible, all the time wishing I could take a crowbar to his head. Then, as if reading my mind, Right at the end of the conversation, I was presented with an optional prompt to punch this odious wretch in the face. Naturally, I took the violence option. Was it a nice thing to do? No. But was it the right thing to do? Definitely yes. The choice had no bearing on my character's alignment, but ingeniously it made me feel like I'd done a good thing, even though I sorta hadn't. When the game reinforces your selection in the background for no reward, does that feel like a cheat? Or does it make more sense than having your actions change the in-game universe to match your real-life sensibilities? It's a hard line to walk. Do you want to feel like you've done the right thing? Or do you want the game to explicitly show you that's the case? To create something where your interactions and choices change the environment on a point-by-point basis, but then obscure it so it looks natural, might be impossible. In Dishonored, why exactly does Dunwall become more rat-filled and stinky if you decide to kill people? Why does Deus Ex Human Revolution give you a body full of military-grade hardware, then have people metaphorically wag their finger at you if you decide to use it? Why does Bioshock tell you that the Little Sisters are unsalvageable, but then give you the power to save them? And why does Mass Effect 3 render all of your choices moot as it presents you with just 3 unrelated ending options? When you come up against games where the morality mechanism is laid bare, it makes you question what the point of being good or bad was, aside from obtaining an achievement. Would a complex choice system have enhanced The Last of Us or Death Stranding? Or is just posing the difficult questions enough to make an impact? I don't mind linear games as long as they're done well. Doom is fun from beginning to end, and has no complexity beyond destroy the hell demons. But if a game asks me to wipe the malfunctioning personality of a race of sentient robots, thereby lobotomizing them, or leave them to find their own way through their troubles at the risk of them becoming a greater threat later in the game, then the build-up needs to be of such sufficient weight that I have to spend 5 minutes of hand-wringing before I make the decision. That's a good moral choice, regardless of the consequences. Not whether I should allow mass murderer Nico Bellic to shoot or spare the object of his vengeance when he spent many hours racking up a triple-digit body count. I believe putting moral choices into video games can give them a depth that burrows into your soul, that when done properly, they can invest you in the narrative in a way that reaches out beyond the screen and speaks directly to your own sensibilities. However, implementing them so you don't feel like you're in a point-scoring loop is a hard thing to pull off. Not everything has to have a major consequence attached to it. In fact, setting up a difficult decision that has no real bearing on the outcome of the game can be more effective than dangling a shiny weapon in front of your face as a reward for making the right decision. You're essentially investing the character with a little piece of yourself, irrespective of whether the avatar knows it or not. It's nice to have callbacks to the choices you made, but it isn't always necessary since you know what you did and how you felt about it. What makes a game memorable doesn't have to be a momentous thing, like choosing who to save and who must walk to their death. It can be something minor, like whether you shared your food with a friend, or gave a high five to a companion after completing a task. As Cliff Shaw, the co-author of the first artificial intelligence program once said, "It's the little things that count. Hundreds of them."